Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. This is our January 2023 general membership meeting, and we are thrilled to have you here. We've been chatting a little bit as we've been waiting for folks to come in and join us. So I'll just repeat some key information for you all. We are recording this information. So if you want to not be included in the recording, you can just stay on mute, throw things into the chat. We'll be sure to get them into the record and recorded and give you the best answer we can. We love to see faces, although we understand that's not always your jam, your moment, your comfort zone. We do want to see your name, your pronouns. If you're affiliated in any way, we love to see that. We love for folks to introduce themselves into the chat. We do have closed captioning available. So if you kind of go down to the bottom icons on your Zoom screen, you should be able to see live transcript, closed captioning, and you can enable that if that is helpful for you. We also like to remind folks that sometimes this is a public meeting and we do have members of the media with us. So if you are a member of the media, we just ask that you only quote and use information from folks that are officially part of the agenda. So coalition staff or our presenters, and encourage folks to follow up if you have with appropriate organizational agencies, if you have something that you'd like to connect with to learn more. So I'd just like to make a little statement. Hopefully you can see our shared screen, and we've got a really wonderful agenda for you. The legislative session has started, and we want to give you a sense of some of the coalition's priorities that we highlighted back in December, where they're at, how you can take action. We want to share with you Anthony Blankenship from Civil Survival Project is going to be here to talk about jail-based voting and access and improvement to that for folks that are currently in county jails across the state and how they can make sure they're voting. We have lots of elections this year, so this is key and prime and timely. We've got some staff announcements that we'll go over. We're going to do a little bit of action and really make sure you're feeling confident about how you can engage in the legislative session, right? Democracy is not a observational, it takes participation. So we want to encourage you to do that. So please ask your questions. If you're not comfortable coming off mute or even throwing something in the chat, we are happy to engage with you, your teams, your staff in a way to make sure that you're feeling like you've got the information you need. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. The King County Regional Homelessness Authority late last night put up all of their public documents around the 5-year plan. So we're going to do a brief touch base on where you can find that information, what we know about the current timeline, and more to come around that. And then we should have time for member announcements. That's what we've got in store for you today. So let's go to our mission statement. And if there's anybody in the audience that would love to read our mission, vision, and values, that would be lovely.
We mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice. Vision, a region that acts on a shared sense of responsibility to ensure that everyone has a home. Values, equity, justice, collective action.
Thank you, Matthew. Very appreciated. We really like to do that. It's really a sense of community building, and it's sort of we are a true coalition, right? We've got a strong membership base, whether that's your organization, whether you're an individual member, whether you're an allied agency, and this is our shared goals and how we're going to collectively move forward and make big transformative systemic changes. So speaking of the fact that we're a membership-based organization, we are in our 2023 membership drive. Historically, the coalition has had upwards of 50 different organizations, from big organizations that have hundreds of staff members and lots of different programs and sites across the county, to small little organizations that sometimes just have a handful of staff at any given time and are doing amazing work in a very local neighborhood, hyper local level. As of 2023, we've had 20 members, organizational members, that have either paid dues or pledged their dues, and we are incredibly grateful for that early start. We typically like to have our membership drive kind of wrapped up by about Q1, although we're never going to say no to having you join the coalition. It's an open invitation all year round. So if you are, not the right person that, handles membership dues for your organization, if you're, like I like to say, that's above my pay grade, but whose pay grade that is, we would love to have that connection. And if you are that person and you're not sure, or you think you might be that person and you're not sure, please go ahead and email me. If one of my colleagues could drop my email into the chat, it is Jody, Jody, at homelessinfo.org. So we also have lots of information on our website. We can invoice folks on an annual basis, a quarterly basis. If you have questions about what it means to be part of dues paying organizational member of the coalition, we are happy to have that conversation with you. It really is a way for us to strengthen our collective power and the work that we can kind of hold as a coalition to bring lots of different folks that are doing this work into the work and like I said, make that big transformative change that we're all going for, which is ultimately to get folks housed. Allison.
Thanks, Jody, very much. I just thought I would add my 2 bits about membership to introduce myself to those whom I haven't yet met. Allison Eisinger. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Coalition on Homelessness. And I want to underscore what Jody has said, and that is simply that the members are the heart and soul of this organization. We have been in existence since 1979, and for 27 years, this organization was 100% volunteer run. Folks exactly like you, and indeed, perhaps some of you, are among the people who started the coalition and who kept it going for 27 years before anyone was ever on the payroll. And it is organizations and individuals who have made that longevity and strength possible. We welcome individual members, and we are a membership-based organization. So our incorporation under Washington State law is that organizational members have certain rights and privileges, primarily voting on the slate of candidates for the board of directors of the organization. But it's also really important as a demonstration of our collective strength. One of our values that Matthew read was collective action, and the collective strength of our positions and our actions is rooted in the work that each of you and your respective organizations does every day and every night. Our dues are sliding scale. So if you have any concern about whether or not as an individual or whether or not your organization can afford to be a member of the coalition, chat with Jody. And that's all I wanted to add. Thanks, Jody.
Thank you. It was a wonderful addition to our membership drive pitch pledge presentation. So we mentioned, I mentioned in the sort of intro that 2023 has a lot of elections. So we've got 4 elections coming up. So for Seattle-based voters, your first election is coming up on February 14th. So this is a special election. It's going to have a school board ballot issue for Enumclaw, and then it also has the social housing. That's the I-135, if you know it by that. Then in March 25th, April 25th, thank you. I appreciate that Allison is right there in my top corner giving me the giving me the nod. Wrong date, which apparently is my theme for the week here, folks. I did this 3 other times this week. Went out to lots of our members with the wrong dates on things. All my fault. April 25th, we are likely going to have a levy. And you may have heard of it as the Behavioral Health Levy, or as they're now calling it, the King County Crisis Care Centers, or the CCC levy. So big impact for folks in our community and folks we work with. Resource, this is really looking at, loss of beds and new options. So that's still a TBD about whether that'll actually hit the ballot, but I think it's looking likely. Then we're going to have an August primary where the Vets, Seniors and Human Services levy will be on the primary ballot in August. And then we've got the November general where we will likely have the Seattle housing levy. So there is a lot happening this year. And Tim and I and the coalition team are really, really wanting to make sure that you've got good information, your staff and your colleagues have good information, and the folks you're working with have really good information about voter eligibility. We have resources on our website. I'm going to throw that link into our page there. We're going to be printed materials, we've got posters, we are able to come and do on-site work with your staff or your clients and your guests. We can do virtual sessions. We just really want, this is really good information and want to make sure that we're supporting you in being able to have good conversations with folks, because there can be a lot of barriers for folks that are experiencing homelessness around accurate and timely information. Washington State is really supportive of folks that don't have a permanent address, don't have an ID. There's ways to work around that. We do mail-in voting. You can register same day all the way up until election day, and then vote that same day. So we want to make sure that folks can really access this opportunity. And like I said, Anthony Blankenship from Civil Survival will be here a little later talking about how voting access intersects with the current legislative session. So we have a lot to talk about. So please, 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 if you need resources, you need information, you want to connect with us and learn more, email Tim or I, and we will happily talk with you and share resources about voter education, voter eligibility, registration, how to cast that vote for folks. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tim, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the training that we have set forth for y'all this year.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. As Jody was saying, it can be complicated getting information about how one votes and how one can be eligible to vote. Can also be really complicated navigating challenging public benefit systems, which is why we provide a series of trainings to help to make it easier for service providers and people experiencing homelessness or housing instability who are seeking those, who are entitled to those benefits. As you're aware, people are entitled to cash and other resource-based benefits in order to, achieve their goals and maintain relative stability. And it's an important way for people to, and we think it's important to be able to help to navigate those systems, not only because people are entitled, but because it helps to kind of move towards our greater goal of working, of empowering people to end homelessness. We have a special series coming up this year. Some of those trainings we have offered before, some you may have heard me talk about before. We are talking about ABD and HEN again. We're talking about Medicaid and Medicare again, TANF and Work First. Those are important topics that we're going to have public benefits attorneys and subject matter experts join us to explain challenges navigating, pitfalls, ensuring that people can be eligible for those systems. And we're also going to be talking about some new programs. We're going to be covering SSI and SSDI next week. So I'll make sure to drop, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop the link to our training page. Thank you very much. And the first one on that list is the registration link to SSI and SSDI. That's next Thursday. We also have new trainings on the working families tax credit, the intersectionalities of long-term care while a person is experiencing homelessness. And we're also talking about staff. We're kind of in early stages of offering some more provider capacity-based trainings. We know that providers have limited capacity and work very hard to be able to serve their clients. And, you know, sometimes make it through the day. And we want to be able to be there for our providers, potentially providing resources for new providers who are new to the sector or new to their roles. And in the future, we will be seeking feedback from providers or from people who hear from providers so that we can make sure those trainings are well informed. In the meantime, if anybody has questions or wants to hear more about the trainings that I mentioned before that are planned, or just wants to talk about the coalition, a project of mine is to engage with members so we can get to know each other, so we can know how we can support each other, and just share resources as they come. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me, like I said, about those trainings or about anything, any other questions you have about the coalition, so we can chat about it. And I look forward to hearing from folks. At this point, I would like to pass it over to Sarah and Allison to chat a little bit about the legislative session that we are just entering.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Sarah Robbins. I'm the policy manager here at the coalition. And I'm going to do a couple things this morning. I'm going to talk to you about some of our legislative priorities. For this session, we're in, I think, week 3. I've lost week 2. Okay, not ahead of myself. And I'm not going to cover all of our priorities today, but I'm going to cover one of our major priorities for this session. And then Allison and I will lead you through how to take action on one of those priority bills that will be heard next week. So a little bit about me. 2 things that I have a passion for is policy and advocacy and public benefits. I spent 10 years of my career as a public benefits attorney and really deeply believe that the state has a responsibility to provide a robust public benefit system as a safety net to those living on the lowest incomes, and also to those experiencing homelessness. And as a result, so one of our biggest priorities this session is making improvements to the Housing and Essential Needs, or HEN program, and the Aged, Blind, or Disabled program. So a little bit about those programs. These are our 2 state programs for individuals without children that are living on basically no or very, very, very low income and are also disabled. So these are the programs that the state provides while people are waiting to get onto federal Social Security benefits, or sometimes, as the case with HEN, just the HEN program, someone is recovering from a temporary incapacity and will be re-entering the workforce. So currently, the Aged, Blind, or Disabled program provides a cash benefit, and it also provides eligibility for the Housing and Essential Needs. Housing and Essential Needs provides, if you are eligible, you can potentially get a rental subsidy, and also here in King County, even if you can't get that rental subsidy because it's that wait list they're currently not open for accepting new clients, you can get essential needs. You can get a bus pass, help with transportation, help with hygiene, cleaning supplies, and those kinds of things. That's a little bit about the programs. There are 2 bills that we are working on, and we're not far enough into session to where the numbers are just off the top of my head. They will be by next week. So one of those bills is Senate Bill 5480. And the other companion bill is House Bill 1260. And what these bills will do is, right now there is a, how would I refer to it? Sort of a technical issue around how the HEN providers have to check eligibility on their side. So DSHS approves the HEN benefit, and they always approve it for 12 months. But the HEN providers don't necessarily start the rental assistance right at the beginning of that 12-month eligibility. It might be that someone doesn't get connected with the HEN provider until multiple months into their eligibility. It might be that it takes a while to find a place to rent, and this can limit that HEN provider from being able to provide a full 12 months of benefits. So one of the changes that we're advocating for is to change the statute to reflect that the 12 months of rent assistance starts at the first rent payment made. And that will ensure that someone gets a full 12 months. Now, people can get more than 12 months if they're on for 12 months and then their benefits get renewed. But for those that aren't in that situation, this will ensure that people can get that full 12 months. The other things it will do is, this is another technical fix, but there is not currently a good data sharing agreement between the Department of Commerce and DSHS. And I know that sounds super wonky and super technical. However, this became a really big barrier in 2022 when the public health emergency HEN waiver was starting to come to an end. There was no way for DSHS, Commerce, and the HEN providers to all be on the same page and share data about whose benefits were ending in order for the HEN providers to be able to outreach those people directly to make sure that people were renewing their benefits. If someone had transitioned over to Social Security during the pandemic and was potentially no longer eligible for HEN, there were some other resources that could keep people's housing benefits going, but people couldn't share information. All of the parties, Commerce, DSHS, and the HEN providers couldn't share information. So this would allow for a data sharing agreement around eligibility to ensure continuity on the program for participants. This would also, one more thing that it does. This would also increase the admin limit for the HEN providers so that they can actually sustain running these programs. The piece around ABD that we are advocating for. So currently when someone is receiving ABD cash benefits, when they are approved for Social Security, they sometimes know this and sometimes don't know this. They have signed an agreement with DSHS that they will pay back all of those cash benefits out of their Social Security back payment. And which ultimately leads to most people don't actually receive their Social Security back payment. Between paying a lawyer out of that back payment and paying back the benefits that they've received to the state, they don't usually get much or any of that back payment. The two bills that we're supporting would eliminate that reimbursement requirement. This was actually something that DSHS put forth as request legislation, which is great. Realizing that this is a policy that really keeps people in poverty and not being able to pay for getting themselves into a rent agreement and all the things that people really need that back payment for. So we will also be advocating once the budget, once we start talking budget in the legislature, we will be asking for additional resources for the Housing and Essential Needs program to ensure that more people can access this program that we know helps folks get out of homelessness and also to maintain housing and not re-experience homelessness. Any questions about these particular proposals before I walk us through a little bit of advocacy? Or Allison, anything else to add?
Thanks, Sarah. I am just curious to know, this is a little bit of member participation for those who are able to, how many of you work with people who are either receiving Housing and Essential Needs HEN or Aged, Blind, and Disabled ABD benefits, or who should be? And if you want to just raise your hand on the Zoom call, that would be great. I see a number of folks. And one of the things that we want to make sure about, thank you so much, great. So we've got folks who are serving youth, adults, and some of you I don't yet know, families. Yeah, so there really are a lot of people who benefit from these programs, but there are thousands more people, especially here in populous King County, who may indeed be eligible for these really crucial benefits, but who aren't getting them. And the main reason is that the programs are not adequately funded. So this is the difference between eligibility and entitlement. And one of the things that we strive to do, as I think those of you who've been around the coalition know, is we try to blend two things together. Give you who are direct service providers and people who are experiencing homelessness the information you need to get access to the programs that and services and resources that you're eligible for or entitled to, and to advocate for those programs to work well and to be adequately funded. And right now during the state legislative session is the crucial time for both of those. So you heard Tim describe the series of public benefits workshops and trainings that are coming up. And you're hearing Sarah talk about the bills that are in front of the legislature right now. What we're inviting you to do is blend those things together. Make sure that the folks who need to get to the trainings get to them, and also bring some of the examples. What is working well? What isn't working well? Are there folks on your team? Are there people whom you work with who may have really important perspectives to share with lawmakers as they develop legislation and budgets about these programs, how they have helped people and how they are working well as how they are failing to meet the needs in our community because they're not able to add more people to the HEN program. That's the nexus where we live as a coalition, and that's where we invite you to reach out to us. It is really, truly the most powerful thing that we can do to bring the everyday, what's working, what's not working experiences of people using programs and people helping those folks together with the work that's happening in Olympia. And it's our privilege and also our responsibility to do that. So I see we have a hand raised from Monica, but maybe that's from my asking you to raise your hand if you have folks who are on HEN and ABD, but if not, Monica, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Great. Okay. Well, I'm very excited, Sarah. I always appreciate because you can explain things that make me think, wow, this does sound like a boring technical fix, but now I understand why really it would help so much to be able to reach out to people in a more organized way when there are program changes that they absolutely need to know about.
Yeah. So we try to, here at the coalition, we try to make it very easy for folks to participate in legislative advocacy. So contacting your lawmakers, letting your lawmakers know your views and opinions on particular legislation. We will probably tomorrow or Monday, we will have an action alert out. You will all get that will make it very easy to click on it. This will be around House Bill 1260, around the Housing and Essential Needs program, to contact your legislators in the House of Representatives to let them know that you support this particular bill. But for today, I'm going to show you another way that you can let your lawmakers know that you support a particular bill. I am going to share my screen.
While you're doing that, Sarah, I'm just going to note for people, for some reason, we're all coalition staff are all logged into our coalition Zoom account. So you can't really tell who's putting something into the chat. So that's why Sarah was suggesting that somebody email Sarah, not me, Allison.
Yeah. Yeah, usually even when we're all logged in, it's usually smarter and picks up our names. But it's not having that capability today. So I am going to call this signing in pro like a pro. Cannot take credit for that because I am not the one with any creative imagination. That's all Allison. So you can sign in pro on the legislative website when a particular bill is being heard in a committee or on the floor. So this is the homepage for the Washington Legislature, leg.wa.gov. And I'm going to, we'll put the final link of where you do this. You can also sign in con if there is a particular bill that you think is a bad bill, that it will harm folks that you work with, or whatever other issues you care about. We also do sometimes send out action alerts to sign in con on a bill, particularly around bills that criminalize homelessness, that limit where people can be and live and sleep outdoors. You can also do that. But today I am going to show you how to sign in pro on a particular bill. Okay, let's get this. Oops, sorry. So from the home page, you're going to click on this right-hand side, participating in the legislative process. And then again on the right-hand side, get your position on a bill noted for the legislative record. And today, so House Bill 1260. So we're going to click on the House, and so this is the House sign-in page. So you do have to know, your bill number, what committee it's being heard in, and when, which we will often send out that information about the bills that we are working on. So this particular bill is going to be heard in the Human Services, Youth, and Early Learning Committee. The committee hearing where this will be heard is next week on the 25th at 1:30. And then our bill, House Bill 1260, Work Limiting Disability is the name of the bill. And then you click on, so you have a lot of different options, which you on your own can also do. Testify, you can sign up to testify during the hearing in person. You can sign up to testify remotely. This particular legislative session is a hybrid session. So there is both in-person action happening and remote action happening. This is what I'm going to do, have your position noted for the legislative record. You can also submit written testimony that will be provided to all the members of that particular committee. You can also see who has signed in for this particular bill. You can see who is testifying, what position they're taking in their testimony, and also who has just signed in pro or con on a particular bill. So I'm going to mark that I would like my position noted for the legislative record. Maybe it's going to let me click on that. Okay. And I have not actually signed in on this bill yet, so I will actually sign in. So I am in support of this bill, so I am going to sign in pro. And I am going to my first name, my last name, whoops. I have my autofill on. So I'm using my work email because my particular job allows me to do this type of legislative advocacy with my job. If you are doing this, you probably need to check with your organization if you can actually use your work email. You probably need to use your personal email and all of your personal information. And then organization, I'm going to put the Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness. This is all of my Whoops. And for address, you don't actually have to give your full address if you don't want your address as part of the public record, because this is subject to public disclosure. You can just put your city and your state. You do, however, have to put in a phone number. So I'm going to put in my work phone number. I am not a robot, and then submit. So I have now signed in pro. Legislators will now see my name and my organizational affiliation. And usually at the beginning of a hearing, they will read into the record how many people have signed in pro, how many people have signed in con, and how many people have signed in other. And I will put the link to that final website where that hearing is being held, if you all want to do the same. And happy to answer any questions on any of that before we move on in our agenda.
I will just say, note, even with Sarah explaining and screen sharing, total time to do that, I don't know, 60 seconds. So we will send you a link. It will be easy. You don't need to do this, this doesn't need to be a big deal. You do need to be really clear about how you're going to sign in, i.e. for almost everyone on this call, you'll be signing in with your personal contact info. And the reason is, just as a little reminder here, because you will be communicating to your lawmakers, the people who are elected to represent you based on where you live, not based on where you work. And that is a really, really powerful new tool. Before COVID, we were not allowed to do this. You had to be physically on the campus in Olympia of the state legislature to be able to sign in on a bill. This is one of the strange ways in which COVID has actually made doing this kind of advocacy more accessible to us. So we are going to embrace it wholly. But if you don't have access to a computer, if you don't want to take this particular approach, there is always this tool, which I'm guessing probably everybody has access to, which is a telephone. It doesn't have to be a fancy phone. It can be a landline. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I see there are some excellent questions in the chat, and so maybe I'll let Sarah address those, and then I'll just very quickly touch on a couple of other advocacy tools.
Sorry,
yeah.
Allison, what am I
Oh.
I zoned out for a second.
I'm so sorry. So we have a couple questions in the chat. Felix asked about whether or not this makes their phone number part of the public record, which is an excellent question.
It is an excellent question. So yes, your phone number becomes part of the public record, meaning that if someone did a public disclosure request, that information could potentially be part of that. It does not make your phone number public on the website. And oftentimes, even in a public disclosure request, they will redact phone numbers.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Felix, because it is one of those things that might give you a moment's hesitation, and it's great to be able to explain it to other people too. There are lots of reasons why people don't want their personal phone numbers to be spread across the web, and the same with their home addresses. So we want to take the fear and worry out of this. I do want to quickly mention two other ways that are super easy ways to comment. One is, and if Nancy Amadei were on this call, I would make her recite the number, but one is to use your phone, whatever phone it is, to call the legislative hotline. And if we were all in a room together, we would probably have to chant this, but oh, check it out. Rosemary Blakemore, look at you. Hold it up so everyone can see. Thank you, Rosemary. Call your lawmakers 1-800-562-6000. I love it. Thank you, Rosemary. Unpremeditated show and tell. So that phone number, 1-800-562-6000, is entered in my phone under Olympia. So if I'm on the bus, if I am waiting for the bus, if I am in line at the grocery store, if somebody complains to me about how they can't find any housing that's affordable, I can whip out my phone and invite them to make that call, even if they're not sure what legislative district they live in or who their state senator or 2 state representatives are. And the reason is that a real, live, lovely person will answer that phone number, which I hope somebody's about to put in the chat, 1-800-562-6000. And that person will ask you for your name, for your address, and they will look up what district you're in and who your lawmakers are. Perhaps like me, you got redistricted, and so I am no longer represented by State Representative Nicole Macri, State Representative Frank Chop, and State Senator Jamie Peterson. I have a new group of lawmakers who represent me. And I really encourage you to do this as a very easy, low-tech, but also kind of human way. They will literally take dictation of a brief sentence or 2 that you want to share. I support the legislation about the HEN program because I work with people who have gotten housed and off the streets thanks to the HEN rent subsidy. One other small little note of interest, House Bill 1260 is sponsored by none other than a brand new state representative elected in, somebody's going to have to help me here, 34th district, I believe, West Seattle and White Center and parts of Burien. I see Nancy Kick on the phone here. And that is State Representative Emily Alvarado. Her name might be familiar to some of you because she was the director of the City of Seattle Office of Housing and a very strong champion of affordable housing, especially and including housing for people on the lowest or no incomes at all. So Emily Alvarado, right out of the gate, is sponsoring a really important bill. And the last thing I will say, because I see Anthony Blankenship here to talk to us about voting, welcome Anthony, is you just got a little bit of a refresher or maybe an introduction to some of the issues and some of the ways to make your voice heard. I have to remind you what I remind myself of every year. We are going to ask you to take action multiple times throughout this session. This is what is known as a long session, meaning it's 105 days long. That is not very long to figure out the laws and the budgets to help run our state and local programs for 2 years. It is a breakneck speed process. And there are lots and lots of steps along the way. If you remember anything from, I don't know, 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade civics class, sometimes called social studies or current events, you will know that there are various committees and that bills go through various committees in the House of Origin, meaning either the House of Representatives or the Senate, and then they cross over. And we're going to talk about some of those details. Some people love those details. Schoolhouse Rock is their jam. And some people find it to be a little bit overwhelming. And some people just zone out because it is boring. But we are here to tell you it is not boring. It is people's lives. And it is going to determine whether or not we are just continuing along, barely managing to keep people alive, or whether we are going to actually make significant progress, which we have to continue to make year by year to create homes that people can access and live in. And there are so many other issues: gun control, access to healthcare, whether or not we have transit friendly and pedestrian friendly streets and neighborhoods. You name it, there are bills proposed about it. So we are not going to cover everything, but just FYI, there is a really exciting bill to stop criminalizing jaywalking that friends of ours are working on that we'll have folks come and talk with us about. And we really want to encourage you to take action every week. This session is really going fast. And when we invite you to take action on something, we guarantee you it will take you 3 minutes or less. Now you can do more, and we will happily talk with you about doing more. You can give testimony. You can have some folks whom you work with give testimony either in person or through video call or by writing their stories down. We will support you in doing that. But if you don't take action and make it easy for your coworkers, your family members, the people whom you work with, your neighbors to take action, your board members to take action, we will simply be irrelevant, because there are thousands of highly paid coat, suit and tie lobbyists who work for lots of money, who are there every day, all day, 12, 15, 18 hours a day lobbying. And that's their job, and they do it really well. Our job is we lobby for our people, and we have to do our job really well. So that means even if this seems to you overwhelming or confusing, please set that aside and know that you can be part of the voice that actually shapes a budget that invests hundreds of millions of dollars in people who need it, as opposed to hundreds of millions of dollars in corporations that don't need it. The one last thing I will say is we're going to experiment this year. We've done Homelessness Advocacy 101 workshops. We've done Take Action Tuesdays. We've done Speak Up pop-ups. We are going to try doing lunch with the front line. Doesn't mean that if you're not a frontline staff person, you're not welcome to join us. You are. But I am going to give a go next Wednesday from 12 to 12:45, and we'll follow up with a link for this because we haven't made it yet. A drop-in hangout session. We will give you opportunities to take action, and we'll want to just hear from you some of the issues that you are curious about or that are resonating for you and that you want to know more about, so that you can make an informed decision and take action and help to pass or sometimes block legislation that is being considered. So I'm sorry, I've gone a couple minutes over. If you want to, please just put in the chat issues that you know are under consideration or a bill that you're interested in or have questions about, and Sarah and I will work through those and think about how we can best inform you all. And now it is my deep pleasure to hand things over to Anthony Blankenship, who is a longtime ally, colleague, friend of the coalition, who has a new role at the wonderful Civil Survival. And I will just let Anthony introduce himself and give us inspiration about a bill that we are going to help pass.
Yeah, I love the spirit, and thank you so much, Allison, for having me, and to the rest of the team. I appreciate and love seeing y'all's faces. Thank you for having me. It's hard to follow Allison, I think, with all the wonderful things you said. I'm here to talk about HB 1174, and I guess a little bit about me. I'm someone who's been justice impacted. And I'm losing my voice, and this always happens exactly when I need to talk. But I'm someone who's been impacted by the criminal legal system. I have a lot of family members that are, and I also have some family members that are currently homeless. So the work that you all do, I really appreciate it because it impacts my family. The work that you all do directly relates to me. So thank you so much. I'm here to talk about HB 1174. The title is called Improving Access and Removing Barriers to Jail-Based Voting. And the hope is it does exactly that. I'm going to drop a link to the bill in the chat. This bill, what it does is allows or it mandates that jails and the auditor's offices in different counties create a plan to be able to go in and allow people in jail the ability and access to be able to vote if they want to. It allows for organizations and people and whoever to be able to go inside, to be able to talk to people that are in jail. What we've seen, some of the good and the bad that what we've seen with voting is that a lot of people in jail positively, do want to vote when we actually go inside and ask them if they're interested in voting. And some people just don't know that they have the ability to do that. What we do know is, people that are unhoused are more likely to be involved in, in the jail system, as well as it disproportionately impacting, people of color. And so what we really want to do with this bill is educate, first of all, is allow people to, or let people know that, just because you're in jail, you haven't lost your ability to engage in the civics process. Number two, we really want to build the voting block of people who've been incarcerated, informally incarcerated. And why we want to do that is because the issues that impact them, I'm a firm believer in, people who are involved in the justice system are probably more impacted by, by what's happening in the legislature and who's in office than anybody else, just because of the way that they interact with different systems. They're more likely to interact with, many systems and not just the criminal legal system based on poverty and other, things that they got going on in their lives. And so really trying to build that voting block. There are a lot of people with criminal records in Washington State, and when you've been disenfranchised at some point, the likelihood of you actually jumping back in is very low. So we really want to be able to both educate, build, and let people know, that Washington is not like the South, right? I think a lot of times what we hear from voters is that, once you commit a crime, you can never vote again. And we try and, with the passage of HB 1078, which went into effect last year, and which the Coalition on Homelessness was a leader in getting passed. Thank you all. People were able to vote as soon as they got out of prison. And what that also did was allow and really what it stated is if you're not under full custody of Department of Corrections, then you could vote. And so majority of people in jail, what this did was make it a lot easier for people in jail to be able to vote. A lot bigger voting block in jail can now vote, which is a beautiful thing. I think with facing housing discrimination, job discrimination, do people really need to be facing voting discrimination as well, right? Like, how can we start getting people back into society and our communities and welcoming them. So some of I don't want to go into too much of the technical aspects of the bill. And excuse me, I gave my voice. I got sick over a month ago, you all, and it just still loves to do this. But some of the more technical aspects of the bill is that it allows for county administrators to be able to go into jails up to 30 days prior to an election, to any election, and start registering voters. It creates a process so when ballots are mailed at that 18-day mark before each election, that auditors have a way to be able to get ballots to people inside of jails. And so, the hope is that hopefully they'll be more hands-on and actually go inside of jails and register voters directly. And what we've seen is some success with that this last year with Pierce County, Kitsap County, having people who've been directly impacted, as well as auditors going into jails to register voters, to hand out ballots. And what we've seen is, like, I think over 150 people in Pierce County Jail alone registered to vote, which is, I mean, as you all know, doing this work, that's a pretty big number. So getting that number of people back into, our community and actually building that voting block is a huge win for us.
Can you say that number again, Anthony?
Over 150, I think it was like 153 people. And so that's huge. I know that the first time they did it, and this was in two different spurts, and so I know the first time it was 80 people, or around 80 people for the primary, and then around 70 something for the general. And so and a lot of those people were still in jail, so being able to access their ballot was a big win for them. And for us, but then there's also the downside and some of the sadness and things that go along with it. Is like, we had a couple people who had experienced incarceration. When they went in, one of the people in one of the staff members recognized one of the volunteers, and was like, said some really ugly things to the person, and made them not feel welcome. And so, the hope is with this bill is that we're creating the barrier and the buffer in the mandate that jails actually have to do something. And so what we also seen in other counties, such as Spokane County, is where the county commission, when we actually had money for jail voting and counties could apply, what happened was that the county commissioners, a couple of them said, no, we don't want this money because people live behind bars shouldn't vote. Also, if they vote, they're going to vote Democrat, which is, I think, a pretty big fallacy. I think there's a lot of people behind bars that are on both sides of the aisle. So what it also does is it designates a voting coordinator. So if you all are trying to engage with people behind bars, it has a jail voting coordinator both in the jails and in the auditor's office. And so you have a contact to be able to reach, to be able to share information. We're putting in some language in there around allowing 501c3s and other entities to be able to share materials with people, because what we do know is that they don't have as much access to information as we do on the outside about voting. And so having the opportunity to be able to educate them in different types of ways is great. And then we have reporting requirements, because we really want to make sure that we're holding all systems accountable and to what they're doing. And so in addition to creating a plan that has to be okayed by the Secretary of State's office, they're going to have to report data and collect data and report that to auditors, as well as the Secretary of State on request, like document requests, complaints, how many people voted, et cetera, just so we can get a good understanding. We're also Secretary of State asked us to put in a portion in there around doing a study, because what we're asking for is to create for Secretary of State to create like a guidance plan. And so they want to work with the Evans School of Public Policy at University of Washington to help create what this plan looks like. And so we got a lot of other technical things in there, but I think I covered majority of it. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I really am looking forward to y'all support. I guess where the bill is at right now, because I didn't really share that, is we had our first hearing last week in the State Government and Tribal Relations Committee for the House, and which you can view on there. You can hear me my voice break there too if you want to, and then next week it's going to be voted on in that committee. And so in addition to some amendments that are going to be proposed by us, and that's based on feedback that we got from the Secretary of State, as well as the sheriffs and police commission. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anthony. And I think I just saw a question about how same-day voter registration might work for folks that are in jail. If you can speak to that a minute.
Yeah, and so some of those counties were pretty successful at doing same-day voter registration. What they did was they had election officials go into the jail, speak with individuals, and if they wanted to register to vote, what they would do is they would help them fill out the forms, or give them the forms for them to fill out, and also work with the jails to get the information that they need, like addresses and social security numbers or ID numbers, or whatever it is that they need to be able to vote. And then what they'll do is right then and there, they'll call it all in to somebody who's on the other line at the elections office, and then they would run everything. Then they would print the ballot. They would bring it to them the next day so that they can. So if you're not just registering, but you're trying to vote on that same day, or really what they did was the next day, and so they would bring the ballots in the next day, and then they would be able to vote in secret. Or in private as much as possible, is what you can do behind bars, but at least not having it so jail officials are looking over your shoulder while you're voting. They would churn that in, and then the elections team would collect it. So that's kind of the process of how it looked. I think every county is going to be a little bit different. They're working on trying to figure out some electronic ways to be able to register to vote electronically through like the intranet, if possible. And so there's going to be a number of ways to be able to register and get everything handled. And we're also asking them to put up materials. We really want people to know, like, hey, voting is happening this week, this month, and having that materials ready. So that's going to be a big part of the plan as well.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, but as people are maybe on the edge of a question or a comment or typing, I wanted to just offer up one of the things that I love that this bill has done for me. And I think this is also true of the work that the coalition and a lot of our member organizations and community members worked on last year around the DSHS CSO offices, is really seeing how this work builds on it from year to year. And, so as Anthony mentioned, this work started back with House Bill 1078, right? Really restoring the right to vote for folks that had a felony conviction, opened up a whole new core of folks that have access to voting. And then, working with counties and county auditors and different jails across the state to really try to implement this, and having success in some places, and then, as Anthony mentioned, barriers and others. So then coming back to the legislative session and that process to figure out how we can really open that up for folks. And I saw a very similar pattern with the work that the coalition and others did around the community service offices and those being closed through the pandemic. And recognizing this issue, working with the appropriate folks in the systems, you know, and maybe not getting as much traction or as buy-in as we needed. And so then, you know, turning to another tool, which is the legislative session and the advocacy that we do to do this. So for me, that's a nice thread through. I've been pretty open about that. I'm a newer person to policy in the legislative process and advocacy in this way, and it's been a nice thread through for me to sort of see this in action and how you know, it just goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this, right? Like we are coalitions, you know, we're a coalition within a coalition, you know, with civil survival around voting rights. The intersection between housing instability, homelessness, and incarceration and racism is just a horrible nexus that we're trying to attack from different ways. So Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time to be here in your throat. I hope you feel better. And we're in good conversation with Anthony and the folks over at Civil Survival. We'll be sharing out information about this bill, House Bill 1174, improving access and removing barriers to jail-based voting. So thank you so much, Anthony. Glad you're here with us. Take care. All right, folks, we're going to move on to our next section. We had somebody, Abby Anderson, who is on the sub-regional planning team from the RHA, had been with us, but had to leave for another meeting. So we wanted to just share a little bit of information about the 5-year plan that the RHA has finally just released. So there is a website that has a lot of information. So I'm going to drop that link into the chat here for you so you can open that up. This is a huge document. There is I think it's a 5-page executive summary that, you know, gives you sort of the high level information. I think the full text is about 150 pages. You are able to go to the implementation board meeting on January 25th, so that's next week, to share comments. They have a survey out as one tool and one way with which they're going to get public feedback and comment about this plan. What I will say before I hand it over to Allison to talk a little bit more about this is really pretty high level, right? This is less about implementation and really more about some big goals and informing, you know, sort of where we're going as a community about this. I am not seeing on the website the timeline for open comment, although I believe we did hear April-ish. No.
April is when the final votes will take place.
Thank you. Take it over, Allison.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jody. Well, first of all, let's just say I'm not sure because the link came, as Jody said, late yesterday, so I haven't opened it, but I hear it's a couple hundred pages. So let's be honest. Those of you who are planning to read that, get in touch because we appreciate your input and your help. But we don't expect that most of you will have time to do much more than read maybe the executive summary and a section that is particularly of interest and relevance to you and your work and the folks you're working with. Fair enough. We still at the coalition would like to hear from you. And the KCRHA wants to hear from folks. Thank you very much, Madeline. Public comment open until February 8th. That's a little bit shorter than we were expecting. So that is curious because
so I think that's the survey.
Yeah.
Specific to the survey.
Well, let's say this. We have already given fairly significant feedback to the KCRHA. Initially, this was going to be voted on by the governing committee and the implementation board in December and January. And we said, hello, that is really not appropriate. That is not an adequate amount of time. And by the way, folks haven't had a chance to see anything yet. And if you call something a draft report, And there's been a huge amount of work done. Many of you have participated in various ways in giving input to craft this draft plan. If you're calling something a draft, then you need to give people the opportunity to comment on it and to integrate that input into a final version of a plan. I think what I will simply say is many of us have been part of developing many plans related to homelessness. For us as advocates, service providers, people with a variety of lived experiences in the Coalition on Homelessness, it is incredibly important to talk about the implementation of whatever the plan is. As far as we can tell, this is much more high level than that. This is about what the KCRHA is trying to scope out for the next 5 years worth of work. But there has to be a process to talk about how to implement what the plan is. And so we have already flagged that we think it's incredibly important, especially in spaces like this, to begin that conversation already. This is not only related to the contract rebidding processes that will be sequentially rolling out this year and next, but it is related to how people do the work and what it takes to implement a vision. So we're eager to have those conversations, but we also want to acknowledge and recognize that right now, this is still the draft plan. And that's where folks' comments need to be focused. We've been very clear from the beginning. We give space at coalition meetings so that folks can give input with the clear expectation that that is an iterative process. So we're working with folks at the Regional Homelessness Authority to give time for them to come and hear from coalition members at a future meeting, and to do that in a time frame that allows for that input to be meaningfully incorporated into this draft before the implementation board and the governing committee vote. In addition to the survey, we are suggesting that there be some more focused conversations that kind of may mirror the process through this summer. That's, again, many of you participated in to inform the draft plan. We don't control this process. We're just giving the benefit of our best collective wisdom and experience into shaping it. And one of the things that I want to flag that I think is worth all of us just thinking about as we read and review is the creation of the Regional Homelessness Authority was in part necessary in this community because there are 39 municipalities within King County, and we need a regional approach. But the implementation conversation is probably going to be happening at sub-regional levels. So one of the pieces that we're trying to think about and start you all thinking about is how do we both honor the sub-regional processes and the necessity and importance of doing that, because we are a huge geographic region, and truly have a unified, coordinated, cohesive regional system. So please feel free to share your thoughts with Sarah, Jody, and me. And stay tuned for processes that KCRHA will be announcing, as well as for an opportunity, at least one opportunity, that we will co-convene with them. Obviously, the work continues even as planning is happening, and that's also just a reality of where we are. So I think I will hand back to Jody for member announcements, but feel free to put any thoughts you might have or questions in the chat. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Allison. And if we could stop the recording.